And here we go. Okay. And my guest is John Lemon. He is a professor at Weber State University. He's the
I'm
author of
retired now. I'm retired.
a retired professor, many interesting and important books and papers that he's presently publishing on academia.com, which came to my attention. And I want to thank you for joining me, John. And also, your particular essay that I want to focus on this time is called Conspiracy Theories. Who believes them and why? How can you determine if they are true? So, John, let's go right to that. How do we separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, when it comes to conspiracy theories?
Well, generally, if you look at a conspiracy theory, there's not a lot of proof to support it. And a lot of the proof that's out there is usually fabricated. For example, like the conspiracy theory about the moonwalk being filmed in a Hollywood studio.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they have all of these, well, look at the shadows and all this stuff. Well, you have shadows on the moon, you know, and the reason why the flag wasn't flapping in the breeze, because first of all, there's no breeze, and second of all, they had a metal rod that ran through the top of the flag so it wouldn't flap. And it's probably still there today. Of course, a lot of the people that believe the moonwalk never happened, they're also Flat Earth Society people,
Mm-hmm.
and there's just so many things out there. Like, I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints here in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many theories that I've heard just about my church, that we worship the seagull, that we worship the angel Moroni on top of all the temples, that we do Satan worship in our temples. It's just stupid things. And they're usually based on people who don't have all the facts. And
I
so,
think that with regard to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, your point is very well taken. There's been all this crazy conspiracy theory out there coming from both left and right. I remember a lot of this stuff sort of really started to come to the surface during the candidacy of Mitt Romney, and you had him
right,
being
yeah,
attacked. He was attacked by conservatives for being involved with some secretive Masonic conspiracy,
yeah.
and he was attacked by liberals for believing in Jesus and God. So, and being involved in conspiracy theories. So the Mormons do have a certain special problem with regard to a lot of conspiracy theories that are
Right.
promulgated.
Another one, I'm assuming you're Jewish.
Yes.
I just finished a book on anti Semitism. Probably the worst, the absolute worst conspiracy theorist was built up around the, what's it called? The Zion's Protocol, or,
Protocols of Zion. Yeah, the Protocols of
yeah,
the Elders of Zion. Mm-hmm.
right, the Elders of Zion. That's right.
Yes.
I mean, you read through there and you have to be an absolute uninformed person to believe the stuff in that book.
Well, I mean, I actually wrote a book myself that covered this topic as one of my chapters, and it was created during the later years of Tsar Nicholas II of Russia,
Right. Uh huh.
and he was angry because of his defeat in the Russo-Japanese War. He blamed it on the Jews. It
Right.
does turn out, if as a matter of fact, that there were some Jewish private bankers like Jacob Schiff who was involved with helping the Japanese. And then he would also be later involved with helping the Bolsheviks. That's a fact of history. But
Right.
to conflate that to blame the entire Jewish people, he
Right.
was, a man of the left. He wanted to, weaken Russia. He was promoting the Bolshevik Revolution. But these sorts of things, which are true in history, can
Right.
lead to these broad sweeping conspiracy theories that suddenly it's the Jewish element, and the Jews are involved, and
They
you
want to
can.
control the world and the
That's right.
economic market and everything. Yeah.
And you can fit that into like an overall anti-Jewish view on the part of some people who take a particular Christian view. That's not to say that Christianity teaches that, but it becomes a
Right.
very in the case of any conspiracy theory, it becomes like this kind of all-encompassing, hermetically sealed idea where anything and everything can be fit into it. And I'll give you just one example of that. Over time, I have interviewed Dr. E. Michael Jones quite a few times, the author of The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit, a brilliant thinker, but certainly by any standards of conventional wisdom, an anti-Semite who has Jewish conspiracy views. And I heard him say recently that the Jews were responsible for the Armenian genocide in Turkey. And how did he make that case? Because he claimed that the the people in charge of the Young Turk government of Armenia, who really had committed that genocide, and by the way, who did so, it was done before then as well. I mean, during the Ottomans, but that
Hmm.
they were influenced by this Russian revolutionary group that was headed up by Michael Bakunin, and that he claimed was Jewish. And he said that this was part of the Jewish revolutionary spirit. And first of all, he makes no proof that they were influenced by this group.
Right.
But even if they were, I looked into this group and I spent some time on it, and they actually were not Jewish at all. They had no Jewish members. It was mainly made up of Russian aristocrats, and Bakunin was about as anti-Semitic as they come, as the
Right.
head of it, and that they were influenced by Italian revolutionaries like Mazzini and others. And I mean, I would think that by his definition, you might call them Catholic. I don't think they were, but
Yeah.
he's into this kind of Orthodox Catholic view. So if you're going to start to make these kind of conspiracy theories, you really have to have your ducks in order, and
Right.
make sure, because otherwise you're delegitimizing real conspiracies. And there are conspiracies. There are
Yeah.
political
There are some real
conspiracies.
ones, but overall, the conspiracy theories that get the most attention are simply ridiculous. And
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're
and in
talking
order
about like
to
aliens and landing
yeah,
on Earth, I mean,
and if you want to double check, if you want to double check, you got to double check your sources. That's gets to the part of how do you tell if they're real or not.
absolutely. And of
Yeah,
course,
you
one of the
got to
biggest
check your
conspiracy.
sources.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I did in the case of the Armenian genocide. Now,
Right.
one of the biggest conspiracy theories to be promoted in recent memory, one that the government ended up spending, like 35 million dollars investigating, and that there were people in the government who were involved in promoting this, was this theory that Donald Trump is a Russian spy.
Oh yes.
I mean, I'm sure you followed that one, right?
Oh, that is that is the silliest one I've heard yet.
Yeah, and yet the government not only was involved in investigating it with this Mueller group that put a lot of old guys in prison for many years and dragged them out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning with SWAT teams, but but it also was actually hatched itself by people inside the Department of Justice and the FBI. There's more and
Right.
more information coming out that indicates that. So the conspirators created this conspiracy theory, and they
Right.
promoted it through official channels, right?
Right. Yeah. They made the whole impeachment trial about a theory.
That's okay.
Hang on.
Happens all the time.
Hey sis, I'll call you back. I'm in an interview. I'm in an interview. Okay, bye. My sister.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it was the whole trial was trying to impeach Donald Trump based on information that was totally fabricated. And
And they knew it was fabricated, which means that they
exactly
were involved in a conspiracy. a
Right.
conspiracy to overthrow the government, actually. I mean, it says, I know that
Exactly.
sounds sensational, but this is,
Well,
it's unprecedented in modern history that you would have people operating like that and actually almost pulling it off.
right. Well, Nancy Pelosi, if she could have got rid of Donald Trump, then Vice President Pence, she would have been to the next in line to the throne, next in line to the
Exactly.
presidency.
Exactly.
And
And then,
she was investigating Pence at the same time that she was investigating Donald Trump.
oh, I don't doubt that. And then, of course, once the whole cockamamie conspiracy theory collapsed after 2.5 years of
Right.
hearing about this day in and day out, I remember getting bulletins from the Boston Globe. I mean, I live in Boston, sent to me urgent news, like Stormy Daniels said this. I mean, and I'm like, I'm ready to have a nervous breakdown as this thing comes over my, my smartphone. And then of course it disappears the next day, and then all these stories that are manufactured and are sent out based on one anonymous source. I mean, the standards of journalism went right out the window, and then they complain
Right.
about fake news. But finally the thing collapses, in its own contradictions. So they come up with this new cockamamie thing with the phone call to the Ukrainian
Right.
president, and Trump immediately exposed it as a fraud by releasing the transcript of the phone call, something that is not done generally by world leaders and shouldn't be done, actually, because
Right.
if you're going to if you're president and you're talking to a foreign head of state, there's an expectation that that conversation is going to be private.
Right.
But it disproves the whole mess, and then you have this guy Schiff go out anyway and characterize the phone call in a completely false way, and that becomes a new
Right.
narrative for people involved. And then the original person who started the whole process, we never find out who that is, and that the inspector general redefines the definition of whistleblower to include people who go on hearsay. And the
Right.
testimony was so ridiculous and contradictory, and yet they actually went ahead and impeached President Trump over this. So,
Right.
this is a conspiracy in a way. So we can talk about
Yeah.
the wheat from the chaff. I mean, we can separate out what standards would we judge something that is a conspiracy
Hmm.
versus a phony attempt to smear an entire group of people, whether it be
Right.
Mormons or Jews. And it's an important endeavor to do. I mean, the reason we have a free media is so that they can investigate and uncover political conspiracies as well as criminal conspiracies.
That's right. Um, and they've got a new conspiracy theory is that Donald Trump mishandled the coronavirus pandemic.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I think that on day one, they already set up a new
Oh
committee
yeah,
to invest.
they already had their minds made up that this is what
Oh, yeah.
they tried to impeach him on this time.
And I think that Trump rightfully told anyone associated with his administration, including Dr. Anthony Fauci, that they were not to testify to the House, because if they do, then
It's going to
it's
be
not.
twisted.
Yeah, it's not going to have anything to do with actually learning something about the pandemic and how we can handle it. It's going to be more like, let's see, on February 7th, you said this, but in fact, wasn't it February 8th? And they're going to
Yeah,
try to trip
they're going
somebody
to
up,
nitpick. Yeah,
right, on some technicality, like what they did to Scooter Libby during the Bush administration. They're going to
right.
put him in a room with a light. This is what they did to General Flynn. This isn't supposed to be
Exactly.
done in this country, where you bring someone in and it's like putting them under a shining light, and you
And then
try to
putting words
find
in
some
their mouth.
technical. Yeah, I mean, it's really something that's very chilling. And
Yes.
I recall, because I've been doing radio off and on for years, and I recall interviewing people on the left years ago who were complaining, and rightfully, about abuses of power on the part of the FBI, the CIA, government agencies,
Right.
Department of Justice, by doing these very kinds of tactics. But now you hear crickets. I mean, they won't come on with me now. They will not talk about it now, because it's all in the interests of this almost faith-like hatred for Trump that's completely
Right.
irrational.
Right.
So, yeah, your essay, of course, deals again with questions of conspiracy. Who believes them and why? How can we determine if they are true? And you set up some pretty good standards of analyzing, conspiracy and debunking those that are untrue and those that basically encompass entire groups of people.
right.
So talk a little bit on that. How do you, again, debunk a bad conspiracy theory?
Well, again, first of all, you check the sources. First of all. Second of all, who's to gain by the conspiracy theory?
Good
And
point.
right. And then why do they believe it? Because some people's lives are so boring, I say, that they've got to have something to make their lives more interesting. So a lot of the conspiracy theories are made by people who uh, they don't check their sources, but they want to be the one in their neighborhood who's the only one in the neighborhood who knows this is a fact. This Trump or Bush was involved with 9/11, or there was another shooter on the grassy knoll, or there's so many.
Oh, yeah, right. No, I mean, I think
Right.
you bring up a very good aspect to this. It means any nincompoop can think they're smart. You get
Yeah,
people who really
exactly.
know, they
Yeah.
don't know a damn thing
When I
about it. I
was
mean,
when I was in college, we used to call them intellectual tinkerheads.
yeah, yeah. I mean, any moron can go out and it kind of has the same thrilling power that gossip
Right.
has, or it's like you're listening in on an eavesdropping on a conversation. There's something about it that's very interesting.
Uh-huh.
I know that I've got some inside information. Here it
Exactly.
is. It's like
Yeah.
yeah, it makes you sound. It's very easy to sound like you're smart, like you know something, and usually when you follow it up with a question about your sources, as you say, or where did you
Right.
get this, you end up with a lot of double talk and a lot of backtracking.
What I
And
always
yeah,
get, what I always get every time I say, really? He says, well, look it up.
look it up. Okay,
Google
fine. Well,
it.
nowadays you can, and I've often said, I mean, as we were talking about with conspiracy theories, a friend of mine who is a real Trump hater, every time I would talk with her, she would have a new conspiracy theory about something that had happened. And I would look it up and find out that it's either false or
Right.
that it's sort of completely way out of whack in
Uh-huh.
terms of what it is. There might be a kernel of truth, but the way it eventually reached her and eventually everyone else had this kind of hysterical quality of like, you could tell that there was something rotten about it. Now that's the kind of stuff that's always been around, but responsible people always were able to diffuse those kinds of conspiracy theories as
Right.
false. And yet, in this particular time, especially since the election of Trump, you have them being promoted by important people like the New York Times or
Right.
like the mainstream press. And then of course they then back down, but they've done damage. I mean, they'll leave it out there, they'll let it hang there for the 24 hours before they bury it because they know it's untrue. And doesn't that make them conspirators in a sense?
Exactly. Exactly. Well, take Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff and Chucky Schumer. They spout this stuff all the time, but they deliberately know that it's false.
That's
But
right,
they
they do
want to
know.
make somebody look bad, so they start this rumor mill that just people who don't have half a brain eat it right up, and then they dispense it.
And it spreads out there. I mean, it was like Mark Twain famously said, I mean, a lie is zipping halfway around the world before the truth even gets its pants on. Yeah,
That's exactly
you
right.
know, it's sort of
Yeah, yeah.
it's
Give him
nothing
Mark
new. I
Twain.
mean,
I love him.
yeah, I mean, the conspiracy theories go way back, and they've always been used
Oh, they go so far back. Yeah,
by people who have an interest in promulgating them, and
right.
then it's the bubbas out there will embrace it because it gives them an easy, quick answer to what can be genuine problems. I mean, that's why like they blame the
That,
Jews for the Black Death or the bubonic plague in Europe because
right.
people would upset for good reason. People
Or
dying, their
because,
children are dying.
or in Hitler's term in time, it was they were the reason for the depression.
Well, yeah, I mean that it gets into a very high, high level conspiracy theory because they'll dig up a couple of bankers who probably are Jewish or at least Jewish in background, and they'll point to them as proof that this is somehow part of the Jewish idea or the Jewish people, that you get a few lousy Jews, and it
Yeah,
becomes like a Jewish conspiracy. I mean, I've debated this issue again with Michael Jones, and I pointed out I could point to I'll raise you a Catholic, and show you
yeah,
a Catholic banker who was involved in this. I mean,
right.
it's kind of a missing of a point here, which is that there are people who are involved in conspiracies, and that yeah, they might be in positions where they can perform a conspiracy, but it's not that they're part of any particular religious or ethnic group. I would
Yeah, we look
argue.
to Hollywood.
Well, that's
And
right. I mean,
yeah, they read scripts for a living, and
yeah,
yet
and they're
they'll
acting.
go out here and they spout this nonsense and try to appear intellectual. Well, then really they're just script readers.
Well, uh, you bring up an interesting question here, John, and that is, I'm just starting to research this, and I don't know a lot about it, but it's this latest conspiracy theory that I've seen. I'm now seeing, the liberal media talk about, and they point. It's called this QAnon. Do you know anything about it?
What is it?
It's called QAnon or the Q.
That's I think I've read it, but I've seen it in print, but I don't know much about it.
Because I'm trying to find out about it. My understanding is that it's being held up, I think, probably as a phony straw dog, because they say the people who embrace it are Trump supporters, and that President Trump himself has tweeted out or retweeted some of the QAnon conspiracy theories. And what I get the gist of it from what I can tell so far is that there is an international pedophile ring that people like Jeffrey Epstein were involved, and he
Right,
certainly was involved in this, and that Hollywood bigwigs are involved, and a lot of heads of government and heads of media and heads of corporations and people around the world who are in positions of power are involved in this international pedophile ring, and that it's very evil, and if it's true, then it certainly is evil. But
but where are the sources? What's their proof?
well, that's right.
It's
I don't
kind
know anything about it, and look. I will have to admit here that I am inclined to believe that there's some truth to this.
no, there
Yeah,
may be a
I
lot
mean,
of
to me,
conspiracies
it's
are
actually
based on
interesting.
eternal truth, but then it gets so blown all out of proportion that then you have to really get out your crap detector and go find the basis for it.
Well, that's right. You have to take a look at the people that are being named, and really examine it carefully, and realize that we don't really know, because if this is true, it's secretive, and we can't know because
Right.
they're not gonna march out and
They're
announce
not
it.
gonna broadcast it. No.
But in a sense, rather than criticize the so-called QAnon and say, oh, this is just a cooked up conspiracy theory, it is a responsibility of our media investigators, and for
Right.
that matter, our government investigators, if there's evidence, to actually take a hard look at this and see if there's evidence of it, because
Right.
there very well may be.
Yes.
And I mean, I want to tread carefully here, and I certainly don't embrace anything like this at all, but I would say that I have a relatively open mind about it, and I think it's something that may have some merit and needs to be investigated based
Right.
upon things that we already do know about.
Well, it's kind of like mythology, legends. They all have a basis in truth, but you have to kind of look for the kernel where that truth is.
That's right. So in a way, rather than jump to the bandwagon and start declaring
Right.
things as true, let's take a more sober view and take a look at the actual evidence of it and the facts of it, and think about it. I mean, like for example, I do think that there was some kind of. I mean, again, this is from years of studying this and
Right.
interviewing people, that there was some kind of a conspiratorial element around the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Right.
I don't think it was just some nut standing up in that window and shooting him, and then that's the end of the story. I think
Right.
there's enough evidence to suggest that there was a
Was a
broader.
conspiracy. Yeah.
That's right. That's
I
right.
mean, like
And
my grandmother, for till the day she died, she believed that Lyndon Johnson was behind it.
I
And
don't, we don't know who was behind it,
yeah,
but
we don't know, but that's what
but
she
but
believed.
yet, and by the way, that's not completely out of hand either. I mean, he
No,
had.
no,
You have to ask who gains. He had a lot to gain. He became president of the
right.
United States. I
Yeah,
don't think that's
James
something that can
first.
be completely dismissed.
Right,
But we don't know. But the point is, there is enough evidence to suggest that there is something else going on there, and I would even say that as a matter of fact, that there is still a large body of material that remains classified around
right,
that assassination. Why should that still be classified? I mean, most of the people involved are dead now. We don't, is there a national security issue here? I mean, if it was the
right,
Soviet Union, fine. The Soviet Union's gone. We don't know.
right.
So the fact that it is still classified, and even recently, about, I think a couple of years ago, President Trump tried to declassify it, and he was told by the FBI that he couldn't. He declassified some of it, but there's still some things there that remain classified. I want to know why. I mean, if you have official secrecy like that, that does tend to fuel conspiratorial thinking.
And
And
exactly, secrecy
yeah,
fuels conspiracy theories.
that's right. And we need to be careful about them because we really don't know. We
Right,
don't know what happened. However, we have to ask whether or not there was, given the
right,
fact that there's still so much about it that's secretive.
right. Because uh, if they do things in secret, what are they hiding? That's always my first question. What are you hiding? See, I was a private investigator and private security officer for about 10 years. And that's after I retired from the Air Force. And, and so just being an investigator myself, that's the thing I always looked at. If somebody was hiding something, and then chances are they were guilty about something that they were doing. And
Absolutely.
we got so many managers and caretakers and stuff like that uh, were embezzling money because they didn't really want security around their property. And that was my first question: what are they hiding? If they don't want security around, they must be hiding something because they're secretive. And once we investigated the other side of the coin, then that's when we usually found what they were doing and busted them and turned them over to the authorities.
Well, John, you are talking about something that everyone accepts, and that is that there are criminal conspiracies to defraud people, to even assassinate people for
Right.
money, for financial gain, for, in some cases, for things like life insurance or for divorce, or there's
Oh
there's
yeah.
crimes of passion. I mean, these things are conspiracies that are criminal. And
Right.
I don't, there's no question that they exist. I mean, that's, if you take a look
Right.
at any of these cop shows like Columbo, I mean, his job as a police investigator was to uncover murder conspiracies by looking at all of the facts and
Right.
digging around and poking around until he could find out, the smoking gun, so to speak, and get
Right.
to the bottom of what happened. And that a healthy society investigates these things and gets to the truth. We need to know that because justice
Right.
needs to be rendered, and because in order for us to have a sense of order and a sense of safety, we need to know that such things are solved, so that
Right.
it doesn't we don't become lawless. And so I think there's no question about criminal conspiracies, and their motivations are different, but they are there. But when it comes to political conspiracies, that's something that we have to be very careful about, but there is certainly no reason to assume that they don't happen, because politics is power and politics is
Politics is
money,
power. Yes, exactly.
and people can gain by engaging in a conspiracy to stop another political figure or political movement, either in terms of their ideology, which may be threatened by that movement, or even in terms of power, taking over. And that's why
Right.
there are assassinations, and they're not criminal in the sense that someone's going to get money for it. I don't think anybody got money for the Kennedy
Yeah.
assassination. It's a
But they did.
political conspiracy.
Right.
It was a matter of shifting power, or that Kennedy interrupted, or he threatened maybe to expose something, or there was some
Right.
issue there.
That's why
And
it's so classified.
yeah, I mean, I wrote a book about this called Assassination in America, where I looked at 32 cases going all the way from Alexander Hamilton right up till today, where there was rumors that there had been an assassination, or there had been an attempted assassination, or an assassination plot, or that some political figure died under situations that were questionable, and there may have been an assassination. And when I wrote this book, it was like putting on a detective's hat. I really looked at the crap, the lousy conspiracy theories, but yet I also looked at things that might have been plausible at the time. Who gained by assassinating Abraham Lincoln, for example? I
Uh-huh.
mean, who gained politically? Who gained ideologically? Did Lincoln stand in the way of someone else's vision for what this country
Right.
needed to
Uh-huh.
develop? And in the process of doing the research, I found I really got an amazing look at American history. I mean, what was going on in the
Oh
country
yeah.
at the time. And I discovered some fascinating and unknown elements of American history as a result. So, there's nothing wrong with legitimate and important investigation of possible
No,
conspiracies.
nothing at all. Because
Yeah.
either you confirm the theory or you debunk it with facts.
Yes. Well, that's the whole idea. Let's debunk the bad conspiracy, the conspiracy that's easy to, well, maybe not easy, but important to
Yeah,
disprove.
sometimes you have to dig a little deeper for some theories than you do for others.
That's right. And it's very hard work. And a lot of it goes to the motivation of those who are promoting it. But at the same time, we have to take a look at what actually may have been a conspiracy, and why that conspiracy was entered into, who was to gain from it, and why they would have done it. So, and by the way, there are some conspiracies that are good, like a conspiracy to have assassinated Adolf Hitler would have been a good conspiracy.
Would have been a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a conspiracy to
And
do
there were
that.
several. To
Exactly.
the German High Command, in fact.
That's right. I mean, you had the von Stauffenberg case, which was documented in a movie called The Flight of the Valkyries, I think,
Right. You
and
had
there were
wrong.
some other ones that were very interesting and important, and they should have gotten more backing from the West.
Right.
So, I mean, conspiracies are not, it's not necessarily, I suppose you could say it's good or bad depending upon whose side you're on.
Yeah. Yeah. In the
Right?
case of Hitler, it would have been a bad day for him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, or for the Nazis, but it would
Yeah.
have shortened the war, and it would have saved a lot of lives if it had been pulled off. So, a lot of these things can be put in the context of which they occur. when you look at conspiracy.
There we go.
So anyway, John, but I really appreciate your writing this book. I mean, it's a great subject, one that I'd like to do more programming on, and I also you've got one hell of an archive here of material. I mean, your most recent one, which I think we'll do a separate program on, is about the ACLU, the True Agenda and their history. What an interesting subject that is.
Oh yeah.
So you've got some great stuff here, and I want to do some more programming with you as I go forward in this great media experiment of mine. And I really appreciate what you're doing. Now, do you want to let my listeners and viewers know of any information with regard to where they can get your works and any websites you'd like to share?
Okay, all of my work is on academia.edu.
Excellent.
/
Excellent
John
website.
Lemon. And / John Lemon.
Very good, John, because I mean, by the way, academia is a great resource. That's how I found you, and I use it all the time. So it's a great place to publish things and to make connections. So anyway, John Lemon, I want to thank you very much for joining me this afternoon.
Yeah, I appreciate the chance to talk to you.
And we'll do it again soon.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Thanks a lot, John.
Okay, bye. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye. And I'll send you a link once it's up.